Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Ukraine's energy corruption scandal will not impact the country's bid to join the European Union. That's the message from Brussels tonight as the EU backs Kyiv's anti-corruption efforts. More on that in just a moment. First, the latest headlines.
And we will cover the financial needs of Ukraine for the next 2 years. The discussion is now on the how.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen pledges to keep the cash flowing for Ukraine.
2026 will be a really good year for the Polish economy.
Poland's finance minister gears up for a promising year to come. And Brussels pushes member states to clamp down on big tech. Europe is falling in behind Ukraine after local officials uncovered a large-scale bribery scheme in the war-torn country's energy sector. 2 ministers have already been sacked, with some of those implicated boasting close ties to President Vladimir Zelenskyy. As Kazimierz Szwesiak reports, the European Commission is welcoming the investigation, saying it proves that Kyiv's anti-corruption bodies are doing their job.
The dust is starting to settle in Ukraine following the massive corruption scandal revealed by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, or NABU, this week. A group of top officials in President Zelenskyy's circle, embezzling some $100 million of public money, has shaken up the trust in his cabinet.
In my opinion, such scandals first of all spoil the country's reputation at the international level, which is extremely important for us now.
Corruption in Ukraine is cited by the European Union as one of the main obstacles for the country's accession to the bloc. And while the latest scandal may seem like a major roadblock, the EU actually views it as the opposite.
The revelation of corruption in Ukraine's energy sector will not affect the country's accession to the European Union. The anti-corruption measures taken in this matter are appropriate, which should be appreciated, especially given that they are being taken during a time of war.
On one hand, you can look at this as a major corruption scandal, but on the other hand, you can also look at this as a proof that this anti-corruption system in Ukraine is actually delivering results.
While the EU has reacted positively to the investigation, it's still one of the biggest corruption scandals in Ukraine since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion. It instantly became the talking point at major events on Ukraine in Europe, as reported by TVP World's correspondent Maciej Wilowski.
Overshadowing the Rebuild Ukraine Forum, where I'm reporting to you live from today, has been a major corruption scandal emanating out of Ukraine. It involves money laundering in the country's energy and defense sectors and has implicated 2 key ministers in Ukraine's cabinet, the ministers of finance and energy. Now, one of these ministers had plans to attend today's conference but could not do so on account of these allegations.
President Vladimir Zelenskyy has called for the resignation of both the justice and energy ministers, who are among 7 other potential suspects in the case. They both handed in their resignations on Wednesday.
And what matters for European path, in my opinion, is not absence of scandals, but the reaction to the scandals. And I think that the reaction was fast and efficient from the president's side, from the government side.
But the investigation is still ongoing, and not all questions have been answered. Analysts point to President Zelenskyy's close relationship with one of the main suspects in the case, businessman Timur Mindic, who has fled the country.
Investigations are taking place into anti-corruption, but when you see it so close to the top levers of power, it's going to raise doubts how much more will they discover.
Zelenskyy also tried to limit the independence of NABU in July, but backed down after massive protests in the country and from the EU. He seems to have calmed down the storm for now by dismissing the 2 ministers, but it's shaping up to be a tough winter for the Ukrainian president. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Szwesiak.
Staying with Ukraine now, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen insists Kyiv's financial needs will be met for the next 2 years. The question now is how, with Europe's finance ministers spending their Thursday in Brussels mulling over 3 options on the table: common debt, grants and loans, or unlocking Russia's frozen assets. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins breaks down exactly what that means.
The EU executive spent much of Thursday litigating to members of European Parliament and finance ministers from across the 27 EU member states the need and possible pathway for shoring up the support for Ukraine as it weathers another year of Russian aggression. We're talking about filling a $130 billion budgetary shortfall expected for 2026 to 2027 as Russia's invasion of Ukraine rages on for another year. Much of that country's national budget has been spent on repelling those Russian troops as they make their advances, as well as repairing damaged housing, transport and energy infrastructure. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reminded members of the European Parliament that last month, 26 out of the 27 EU heads of states agreed that they would fill this budgetary shortfall.
It's clear we will deliver and we will cover the financial needs of Ukraine for the next 2 years. The discussion is now on the how.
So there are three options on the table for filling this financial gap. The first is using common debt, so joint borrowing out of the EU long-term budget to give Ukraine. However, terse negotiations are currently ongoing regarding this 7-year budget, with more headroom needed to fill this huge hole. The second option being grants dispersed by those member states individually. They will have to explain to their citizens why they are fronting up this cash for Ukraine. And the third most contentious but also the most popular option is a €140 billion reparations loan for Ukraine. The aim is to use the cash proceeds from immobilized Russian state assets currently held in Belgium to give Ukraine. But the Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever has maintained his steadfast block against the pitch, stating he believes it is not exactly legal and it opens Belgium up to serious legal consequences if Russia wants to take that country to court. The European Commissioner for the Economy, Valdis Dombrovskis, explained that out of all of these options, the reparations loan still is the most popular.
There are other options, we discussed them, but obviously they come with higher fiscal costs for member states, so that's just the factor.
Thursday's discussion, however, is not the end of the road when it comes to fronting up this cash. EU heads of state will meet in December for another crucial meeting where they will vote on all of the options, hopefully giving Ukraine the money that it needs. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
Washington is again conceding tonight that the Kremlin is not seeking peace. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying Vladimir Putin wants to seize the rest of the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine. His remarks come as arms deliveries to Kyiv resume after a 43-day government shutdown. Natalia Komarov reports.
If I weren't president, that war could have led to World War III.
Washington's latest assessment: Russia is not seeking peace.
Assessment that Russia does not really want peace.
Well, we can only go by what we see. I mean, I think they've stated clearly what they want is they want the rest of Donetsk, and obviously the Ukrainians aren't going to agree to that.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke to reporters after the G7 Foreign Ministers Summit in Canada. After the meeting, the ministers jointly reiterated their support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, as well as plans to increase the economic costs of war for Russia. On the Russian side, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expressed readiness to resume peace talks in Istanbul. There is no indication, however, that Moscow would pull back on its maximalist demands. 3 rounds were held earlier this year, followed by POW exchanges, but no peace plan emerged.
Putin attempts to win at the negotiating table what he cannot win on the battlefield, and this is just another example of it.
As Washington reopens after a 43-day-long shutdown, arms deliveries to Ukraine should soon resume. Sources on the ground say that this time, the pause in weapon shipments was much less of a problem, as Kyiv now possesses its own long-range missile, the Flamingo, used to strike Russian military infrastructure.
This time it was not felt as acutely as other times because, again, thanks to our own internal defense capacities, as well as other partner countries, we've been able to not have to rely so completely on the United States, although we are grateful for their help.
So many people have died in this war.
After nearly 4 years at war, Ukraine is becoming increasingly resilient to mood changes in Washington. But what it really needs is a prospect of just and lasting peace. And that doesn't seem any closer now than it did in February 2022. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
A political standoff between Lithuania and Belarus is heating up, with more than 1,000 Lithuanian trucks stranded on the Belarusian side of the two countries' line of contact. Vilnius shut down 2 border crossings last month in response to repeated balloon incursions into its airspace. And while Minsk has reportedly refused offers to open a corridor exclusively to evacuate the trucks, it's instead dishing out daily parking fines. Konrad Gorlinsky explains.
Over 1,100 Lithuanian trucks are still in Belarus following Lithuania's closure of the border between the two countries. Now, they've been stranded there for days, and now Minsk has funneled the trucks into a parking lot where it'll be charging them 120 euros per day. Of course, those who fail to pay the fees will risk having the trucks confiscated. This, according to a decree signed last week by Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko himself.
They can't just loiter on the roads. 1,100 or 1,200 big trucks that were parked somewhere out there.
Lithuanian officials shut the border last month in response to constant incursions into its airspace by smuggling balloons coming out of Belarus. Now, a number of these incursions had forced the Lithuanian authorities to close the country's major airports numerous times in the past month.
These actions are clearly an attempt to pressure us, but I believe our response has been appropriate. We are facing a hybrid attack.
Lukashenko, of course, would like Vilnius to reopen the borders completely and return to business as usual. However, he refuses to do anything about the hybrid attacks. So it looks like this dispute is nowhere near resolved. The Lithuanians, for now, are trying to get a humanitarian evacuation corridor open for drivers.
We will continue to appeal to the Belarusian authorities at the level of senior border officials to open 2 border crossing points for the evacuation corridor on both sides. We are awaiting their response.
The Lithuanians are counting on pressure coming from the EU as well as from the US, particularly as President Donald Trump has just appointed a special envoy for Belarus.
I welcome the appointment of John Cole as the new US special envoy to Belarus. I will meet with him today to discuss key issues of mutual concern, including how the Belarusian regime continues to instrumentalize various situations to increase pressure on Lithuania.
On Thursday, Lukashenko publicly urged his ministers to, quote, accelerate the process of restoring normal relations with the Lithuanian side. But despite this rhetoric, Lithuania's Prime Minister's office reported on Thursday that consent to open the humanitarian corridor has been denied by Belarus, and Lithuanian truckers remain hostage. For TVP World, I'm Konrad Gorlinsky.
High hopes that Poland's economy will fly high into next year, with the country's economy growing 3.7% in the latest quarter, up from the same period last year. As Jan Kennedy reports, some say net exports are the weak point, hampering even faster growth.
Polish economic growth figures for the third quarter are in, and there is good reason to celebrate. Between July and September, the Polish economy surged by 3.7%, the highest growth rate since the third quarter of 2022.
Domestic factors generate some 4% of year-on-year growth. And when I say domestic factors, I mean private consumption, public consumption, and investment. The factor responsible for the fact that we are having 3-point-something growth rates this year and not 4%. This is net exports. This is weakness of demand in the Eurozone.
While these external headwinds are expected to persist, Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański told TVP World he expects even stronger performance next year.
I truly believe that we can accelerate further and that 2026 will be a really good year for the Polish economy. We see there are more and more investments of private companies.
What will attract this investment? Major infrastructure projects, which include Poland's first nuclear power plant and the development of offshore wind farms in the north, as well as the mega airport known as CPK in central Poland.
We are seeing those projects happening only now. And in 2026, of course, those projects will be continued, but also what we expect is trickling down or expansion of investment from those several very big projects to the broad economy.
By the end of 2026, Roy says investment should become the main growth engine, contributing to a projected annual rate of 4%. For TVP World, I'm Jan Kennedy.
It was designed as a continent-wide effort to hold big tech to account. But more than 2 years since the European Union's Digital Services Act was first rolled out, Poland is still logging in. Warsaw missed the deadline to appoint a domestic watchdog all the way back in February last year and is now one of a handful of capitals that have been referred to the EU's top court. Aisha Abachi reports.
Freedom of speech is the cornerstone of the internet. But what happens when there are no clear rules to protect users from hate, scams, or disinformation?
10% of Meta's income comes from scam-related ads. That's the first thing. The second is that in dealing with large platforms, they often minimize their responsibility and capabilities, saying, we don't have the tools, we can't. Well, if not them, then who? I know colleagues whose images were misused in ads. Removing those ads is practically impossible. This shows how unprepared we are.
Across the European Union, since August 2023, the Digital Services Act, or DSA, aims to make online platforms more accountable.
The DSA is here to protect free speech against arbitrary decisions, and at the same time, to protect our citizens and democracies against illegal content.
But in Poland, the DSA is yet to be implemented. Each EU country was required to appoint a national regulator, a sort of watchdog, to oversee these rules by February 2024. But Poland missed the deadline.
Unfortunately, it became a political discussion because some parts of the opposition wanted to use it as some kind of censorship, which is not the case because the Digital Services Act is against illegal content in the internet.
Poland is among 5 EU countries alongside the Czech Republic, Spain, Cyprus and Portugal referred by the European Commission to the Court of Justice of the European Union.
Why we need those regulations? Because we see that children still on social media they can see some materials, they can find pornography, they can find phishing scams.
This not only means that the country may be slapped with financial penalties by the EU's top court, but also that Polish internet users don't benefit from the diligence Brussels is imposing on big tech. Just in October, EU accused Meta's Facebook and Instagram for not having an easy and accessible mechanism for users to flag illegal content such as child sexual abuse and terrorism material. If found guilty, companies could face penalties of up to 6% of their global annual turnover. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badja.
And joining me now for an exclusive interview in the studio is Erkki Keldo, Estonia's Minister of Economy and Industry. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I want to start with the latest out of Kyiv. We've seen Brussels fall in line behind Ukraine, backing its anti-corruption efforts. Has Vladimir Zelenskyy been strong for cracking down or weak for letting this happen in the first place?
I would say strong for cracking it down because mistakes can happen, let's be honest. But it's important what's the response. And the response has been concrete, direct, and everybody's saying we know there's no place for corruption. There's no justification. And the reaction from the Ukrainian politicians have been correct, concrete, and right.
So you think Ukraine and President Zelenskyy comes out of this stronger than perhaps they were before?
We'll see. I don't know Ukrainian internal politics that much, but it depends how the crisis evolves. Are there any new circumstances that are coming up, or is it certain that those people what have done, those suspicions, would be the end of it? So every crisis is a little bit different. It shows, but the first couple of days, I would say, President Zelenskyy has been really concrete and direct.
Well, I guess it's about the foreign policy picture too. You've spent the day at the Rebuild Ukraine conference here in Warsaw. Some of the Ukrainian delegation failed to show because, of course, they're now facing charges. I mean, could this saga impact Kyiv's political capital, its ability to keep the West on side? And I'm talking about Washington here.
I don't think so. I don't think, as I mentioned, there can be problems. It's a question how to react, how do you communicate it out of your country, and the communication has been straightforward. And already, as we've seen what the European Commission has said, we'll see what the US has to say about it. But the question is, let's turn this around. Actually, Ukraine now has capable anti-corruption agencies that can detect potential corruption at the highest level. So this is something that shows that the state of Ukraine is actually working really good, because if you see that kind of corruption and actually can discover it, it's also a show of strength.
The thing is, it's all of interest to your country, right, to Estonia. I mean, you share a direct line of contact with Russia. What happens in Ukraine matters to Estonia. I mean, does the news of this type of deep-rooted corruption within a country that Europe is fully supporting and that is at war with the Kremlin, I mean, does it in some ways embolden Vladimir Putin and his demands, for example, that Ukraine shouldn't join the EU, shouldn't join NATO?
Definitely not. We definitely have to divide those two issues. The full aggression towards Ukraine, Russian aggression, is still ongoing, and there's no justification. And if there are problems inside Ukraine, inside of their authorities, they have to manage it. As I mentioned, there's no place for corruption in democratic world. But let's be honest, Putin and Kremlin, they're nothing like democratic world. They are authorities, they are the ones who actually are doing the aggression, killing innocent people every day. This is not even comparable, let's be honest.
Do you see any world where this impacts Ukraine's accession hopes, particularly to the EU? The European Commission and the Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, today saying no, but do you see a future where it does?
Not really. As it is, there are specific measures that need to be criteria that need to be met if you want to have access to and integration towards the European Union. Those criteria are still there. Ukraine has to work on those, and I don't see any real obstacle because of this one incident.
So let's talk about Estonia. You're a small nation, a population of about 1.3 million people, and some use your country as an example when they're talking about a potential Russian incursion. They say Estonia could easily be cut off from NATO or from the EU. Are you worried about Moscow and that the West might not come to help if Russia crosses the border?
No, we're not. Let's be honest. We have been living with the Russians as our neighbors. When we regained our independence in the start of 90s, we have been living with the crazy neighbor. We know. That's why we're investing heavily into our own defense. This year, our defense expenditure is around 3.4% of our GDP. We have already agreed that from the next year and years after that, it will be at least 5% of the GDP. The so-called future NATO criteria that we are already meeting next year. And after Finland, Sweden joined NATO, the Baltic Sea is basically a NATO internal sea. But I would say that we know Russians and they know only one language. It's strength. You have to show strength, you have to show unity. I think where Putin miscalculated was he was trying to divide Europe. He was trying to divide NATO by attacking Ukraine and making, I don't know, more energy prices increase in Europe. But actually, what happened, Europe is more united than ever. I'm really happy that a lot of European countries are actually investing more and more into their own defense. And we're developing European defense industry. It's one of the industries that is growing the most fast in Europe. In any other business or industry, it's really hard to see growth. But in defense industry, we're seeing new technologies being developed, doing a lot of cooperation together with Ukraine, getting really good information, new skills, what's happening in the battlefield. So no, we're not afraid. We are ready. We are preparing. So nothing would happen.
So it sounds like a very similar position to Finland, who also shares a very long border with Russia. I was there a few months ago, and the message seemed to be, we've been preparing for Russia, and we've had Russia on our doorstep for years, for decades.
Exactly. We have to know who is, unfortunately, our neighbor. Of course, we would like to have a normal neighbor, but...
Is it an enemy as well as a neighbor, Russia?
Of course. Let's be honest, who else will have an enemy as an European country? And this is not the question. Every time I go abroad into Estonia, I say it's never a question about one country. It's a question about democratic values. Russia, Putin, they do not represent those values that we represent here in the European Union. So it's never a question about Estonia or Latvia or Poland. It's a question about how to keep our democratic values, how to defend them, and we have to do them by being united, being able to invest more into our own defense, so we will be prepared, and then nothing will happen.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, we spoke to him last week and he told us that Warsaw faces a spending decision between, quote, guns or butter. Does Tallinn face the same kind of a dilemma? I mean, would you say Tallinn is on an economic war footing or at least moving towards that when it comes to specifically the work that you do on the domestic economy?
As I mentioned, yeah, because we are investing heavily into our own national defense. At one point,
that's the top priority.
Exactly. At one point, it gives us more capabilities to develop our own defense industry, to do more collaboration. Today, I met with my Polish colleagues. We talked about how Estonian and Poland defense company clusters could cooperate more. It gives us more possibility. And defense industry, I would say, is a really good example where security actually meets economic competitiveness, because defense industry is one of the highest added value nowadays. It's fully technological, it has really high paying jobs, so it gives potential for economies to grow. But yeah, we have to be reasonable, we have to be open and honest about it, that if defense is getting so much more money, then we have to cut our national budget somewhere else. So we're cutting everywhere else a little bit, and we always have to look how to make different public services more effective. And there, Estonian, I would say, leverage comes in. We're talking about digital services. They can be more accessible, they can be more cost-effective, and actually different services can be even better used for the public.
Has Rail Baltica taken too long, this line connecting Finland and coming through into Warsaw? I mean, there's a deadline of 2030. Do you see that deadline, even a basic version of Rail Baltica, meeting that deadline?
It has to, because all of the three Baltic states have promised to the Commission that the first train has to ride at 2030.
So you maintain a confidence that
yes, on the Estonian side, already half of the railway is being built. All of the railway has been already planned and projected, so we are definitely on the timetable and on the schedule.
So you're confident in 2030 there will be trains running from Warsaw to Tallinn up into Finland?
If I'm not mistaken, at least, yeah, they have to be throughout the three Baltic states. That was the promise to the Commission, and we're definitely keeping our promise.
We're running out of time, but on the issue of cold hard cash for Ukraine, President Zelenskyy says getting more funds from the EU is a question of surviving. Now, Ursula von der Leyen says a reparations loan based on frozen Russian assets is still the best way to do that. Are we seeing the politics of Brussels putting Kyiv's survival at risk?
I hope not. There are 27 different countries behind the table, but we have been, from the start, we have been supporting that those Russian frozen assets should be taken into use and actually helping Ukraine. Would it be military aid, humanitarian aid? Because it would be only just and right to use those aids, because Russia has been who started the full aggression. They are the demons, or they are unfortunately the terrorists that are doing this war and killing innocent people in Ukraine every day.
And lastly, very briefly, will Russia ever stop? I mean, will Vladimir Putin ever pack up his, shall we say, imperialistic bags and go home and stay home?
That's really, really hard to see. But as I already mentioned, Putin and Russians, they know only one thing. We have to show strength in Europe and unity. We have to be prepared, then we can live in peace.
Erkki Keldo, Estonia's Minister of Economy and Industry, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.